Hey everybody, my name is Adam Mullis, and this is creating an engagement curriculum during the pandemic. Thank you so much for being here today. I can't thank you enough for all you do for children. A little bit about me. I got my master's in curriculum assessment instruction, and I'm currently working on my PhD. This is my 6th year of teaching. I've taught in 2 districts, one in South Carolina and now in Cobb County, Georgia. I've had experience being a lead teacher for my district, and also I have experience working with our PE, or South Carolina's Physical Education Association, which we recently put on a virtual conference. So the goals of this presentation, I went through and kind of literally dumped out my brain and my thoughts of curriculum during the pandemic and from my opinion, best practices and some things to consider. My idea is to give you 1 or 2 ideas that you can use in your situation. Hopefully, if I can give you at least one that you can use, your next day of teaching, I've done my job. I'm not going to tell you what to think on an issue. I'm just going to try to present different sides of, something and let you make up your own opinion because you're an educator and you know what's best for your students. So warning, I'm not an expert. By no means. I don't feel like anybody is necessarily an expert of teaching during, the last year. Yeah, the last year. So I'm telling you what I know and what I have done and what's worked for my students. So I hope something can be helpful for you as well. So I've taught so many different ways, just to give you a little bit of background, and I'm sure maybe you have too. So I teach 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. I've taught where students haven't had to show up to class. I've taught where students have to show up to class on Microsoft Teams and Zoom. I've taught 50-minute classes. I've taught 90-minute classes. I've taught all virtual classes. I've taught classes where there are virtual students and face-to-face students. And currently, I teach 2 in-person classes and 1 virtual class. I've taught in a gym, I've taught in a large room, and I've taught outside. So a lot of different situations in which I'll tell you kind of what we do for each and why. To give you kind of a background information, and I do realize that 2020, 2021 might feel like you're getting tackled by 5, 6, 7 NFL defensive players. We have so many things on our back right now, literally, with mental health, personal issues, new expectations as a teacher, fear of COVID-19 in our health and safety, new platforms and students not participating like they would normally. So my motto has become, particularly this year, I feel like we're all getting tackled. We're all following. So we're all falling. So we might as well fall forward. So that is my goal for this year. Even if it's a smidgen of progress, we can still make that attempt to fall forward and get a little extra yardage to add to that, little picture there. What keeps me in check when I get frustrated with things is what's inside my box and what is outside my box. In my opinion, my attitude, my effort, my lesson plan, and my curriculum, what I can plan are in my control. What is not in my control is COVID-19, students showing up to class, students participating, students turning camera on, and if school is online or not. So when I think of what I can control, my mindset is I will give it the best that I can for the things that I can control. So when creating a curriculum, particularly if I were to go back and do it all again, and start over, some serious topics to consider, whether it's online or in person, is how are children? Social emotional learning has been a topic on every professional development that I've attended, and rightfully so. Students would have a hard time developing those coping skills. I personally have had a very difficult time with a lot of the changes, and I'm sure many people have. Empathy. I can't imagine trying to deal with this as a 13-year-old. I recall 13 being very, very difficult. So constantly reminding myself what skills I had, and what I would be able to do without help is keeps me in check when I get frustrated with things like students not showing up to class. Equitable. It is very easy to get frustrated with things like not turning your camera on, for example. And I love middle school students and I think they're great, but of course there are students who could turn their camera on, but at the same time, there are students who can't for so many reasons that I personally can't understand. So that empathy in helping things be equitable are critical as much as possible for students to be successful. Another thing is, what is most important during this time as far as the standards we teach in physical education? How can we make our lessons both educational and entertaining? I think it's critical to keep things as simple as possible. Students have a lot on their plate, even now that they've been online learning for a year. That's still not as much time as they had in regular school. So how can we keep things simple? At the beginning of the pandemic, or even at the beginning of the school year, so many teachers were creating Bitmoji classrooms and this and this and that, and they're so cool. But at the same time, holy moly, that may be confusing for kids. And last but not least, how can we balance our lessons with important content and things that they have to know and checking in with students along with just the time they're sitting on a screen, which we know can't be the best thing for their health. So those are things to consider. Our big seven are things we really wanted them to understand and learn, and we decided that these are most important. You may agree, you may disagree with your physical education and state standards, but we thought it was important, regardless if they were online or in person, to enjoy exercise, understand why exercise is important, learn fundamental exercise, and that kind of goes back to that equity piece of things we think most people can do. Goal setting is critical both for your physical health, mental health, and in my opinion, life skills as well. We want students to get moving outside of PE, maybe now more than ever. Reflections is reflecting on that process of what we did in class, why we learned it, and their behavior and effort. And of course, maybe more than ever, that health and wellness component added with physical education. In my situation, that's worked out really nicely because we've had more time to discuss and learn these things and maybe compared to a normal physical education class. So once again, going into this a little more detail, we wanted students to be able to do push-ups, squats, curl-ups, and lunges for anywhere between practical exercise from daily movements to sport movements. We feel like that is the minimum of what they need to be able to do to keep themselves healthy. We also want them to understand, the brain, how the brain functions better with exercise, the physical and mental benefits. We've also done things like a portfolio sheet. I've always wanted to do a portfolio sheet throughout my career, but never really got into a good rhythm. But this is the perfect time to have students really keep up with those goals. And I'll talk more about that later. Line dance has been a huge hit, along with being creative. We've done things like make your own practice, which I'll discuss later, paper ball drills, which is something I'll show you, and just the why of PE. So these are things we've done with our virtual students. In my particular situation, there's not a whole lot of access to technology like in physical education. So Flipgrid is an amazing tool. And if you haven't heard of this, I would definitely suggest giving it a Google. They have online sheets and stuff like that. In short, if you've never heard of it before, it allows students to safely send videos to you. You can make it open to the class, or you can make it where you can just see it, which I think is really important for middle schoolers. So I've used Flipgrids for students to introduce themselves, even if they won't like interact or turn on their camera. A lot of students will interact with me specifically through Flipgrid. I've also taught dance and let students create their own dance, which I want to show you what one of my students did because he is awesome. So here we go. He decided to make up his own dance there. He actually can break dance really well. I've seen him do it a couple times. And then boom, the big finish coming up, bang, hit him with the split. And honestly, I'll be that stuff like that. Just think about that. You're online school all day, and then a student finally gets up and makes their own dance. Even if they won't admit it, you know that has to make their day a little better. Flipgrid is also great for things like push-up and squat assessments. And even if you were willing for a skill assessment as well. I've also had students teach themselves a skill. So I give them, let's say 20, 30 minutes to go online, look up an expert, for example, a professional skateboarder to learn an ollie. If they can safely, go practice that skill, and then they have to tell me about what they did, or at least what they learned and what they were able to. And a lot of cool things like that. And then sports reports would be another one. Students could pick a sport of interest and then tell you, 3 to 5 facts about that sport, why it's important, and where they could play it. A great way to engage kids who may be scared, shy, or can't turn on their camera during class. And you could give them a Flipgrid link to do it outside of class or on their own time and still learn what you want them to get at. Another thing, trying to make it more fun, Kahoot and quizzes. I'm sure you've heard of these. These were a big thing. Just trying to engage kids and help them learn in a fun way, even if it takes longer, still trying them to enjoy class and learn that content of PE or health, or both. Another thing that I found successful is field trips, virtual field trips, trying to promote where kids possibly could be, physically active and safe. We have the Silver Comet Trail in this video, and I'm not going to play it just for time's sake, but it will be it'll be available in the PowerPoint and the resources. It talks about when it's open, why it's open, it's free, and you can use it to be physically active. So once again, where in your area could you do this? Or even maybe, hey, sometime when things get back to normal, you could go here, here, and here for virtual field trips. A thing that surprisingly my students have liked, so I ended up Googling one day, guess the emoji. So of course they would have 25 seconds on the clock, and you could just literally YouTube these. And students do 10 jumping jacks and then guess what the emojis are in the chat. And students really enjoy that. They're doing exercise. Sometimes at least they're saying that they're doing exercise, and we're having fun and making exercise fun and playing a game instead of straight up me just being like, hey, do 10 push-ups, or let's do 10 push-ups together. Students really enjoy guessing and completing exercises and trying to make it fun. So paper ball challenge, all you need is a piece of paper. We do this, I've done this with my in-person kids or my virtual kids, and sometimes both, because this is literally the only piece of equipment we've had. So sometimes I'm just like, hey, we're gonna do some challenges. So of course, trying to keep the ball up in the air, trying to hit it on the back of the hand, off the elbow and like pop it up, behind the back clap competition, which is like, okay, so if I can clap once, then you would try to throw it up and clap twice and catch. And then I would do 3. Elbow, clap, clap. So our clap, elbow, elbow is just simply throwing the ball up, clap, elbow, elbow. I've come up with a million different challenges they could try. Sometimes I'm let them 6 feet away with a partner and try to make up their own catch and let their partner try it. Just trying to give kids something they can do to get them up and active that every kid has. I'd love them to have paddles and stuff like that, but I can't expect all my students to do that. Even if I gave them 10 choices, that would be difficult to do. Now, maybe you're in a different situation, but I haven't had a student tell me, hey, I don't have any paper, I can't do that. So trying to find a way that they can safely use their own equipment and then throw it away in person or at their house has been a way to get them moving, and a little bit of hand-eye coordination. Once again, it's only like 3 to 5 minutes, but students seem to enjoy that time just to try that. And I'm sitting there with them trying it too, to make sure it's easy enough or hard enough. And a lot of minute to win it challenges. Okay. Sometimes you got to take a pie in the face to motivate students. Here I said, if 75% of you turn on your camera, then I will let my fiance pie me in the face. And as you can see, she is really enjoying that particularly. Another fun fact is sometimes you just got to throw up the baby Yoda to get them excited. Little things to keep kids engaged. And honestly, it wasn't that big a deal for me to take a pie in the face, to try to motivate them to do what I need them to do. Because in my personal opinion, if they have their cameras on, they're more likely to be engaged, and I can hold them accountable easier. So I call these labs. So at some point during our 90-minute lesson with, a 7th grader, that students having a really hard time focusing. So I try to give them work that they could go out and try, or at least maybe they could try a little bit later in the day. So for example, if we were talking about power, maybe a broad jump or a vertical jump is something they can do to test their power, write a reflection about it. Other things we've tried are like clap push-ups, which could be an example of power, or how far they throw or kick an object, or try skill. So the idea would be like, hey, go try these things and come back in 20 minutes. Or if you can't try them now, maybe you can try them after school. Once again, that flexibility is crucial to give them, a chance. But students have kind of liked doing those things, and they love to see how far they can jump. Mostly for my virtual kids, to give them a break from staring and listening to me talk, but has been a good way to motivate them and engage them. Scavenger hunts, our show and tell, have been a super successful way, probably something you've heard of. Once again, when I design scavenger hunts, or ask them to show me something on camera, one or two reasons. One, to just get them up and moving and have fun. Two, to have them show me something and for me to learn about them. Like, for example, I've said, hey, go find something blue and show it to me. And, they have to get up and come back to the screen, or they can show me, like, for example, my cup. Or if they can't turn on the camera, they could type it in the chat, which has been a successful way. For example, Zoom has a chat, Microsoft Teams has a chat as well. Another example is like, hey, go find something that makes you happy. And that way I have learned a lot about a student. And that is a good way to connect without trying to make it too hard to connect. I've had students show me their dogs, their cats, their pets. I've had family members show up on Zoom. I'm sure you have too. And honestly, it's a great way to get to know their kid. And honestly, sometimes I learn more about students on Zoom than I have in person, because they are at their home or wherever they live. Okay. Another thing that's been successful that I might not normally have time for in a regular PE class is having a sports moment. So even if I can't show them the sport, or we can't actually do it together because of lack of equipment or whatever, I could still show them the strategies of badminton or soccer or disc golf. I can still promote these lifetime sports that maybe they can do someday. Or maybe it's an international sport, which is honestly something my colleague have done, that students really enjoy learning about sports they've maybe never heard of. So now we're talking about face-to-face students with equipment. Now, once again, there was a good portion of the year where my principal said, you cannot use equipment for any reason. And I said, okay. I was able to negotiate, I guess you could say. And these are the rules that we came up with. So for use equipment, we have to clean hands before and after. We cannot share. So anything we do has to be just them, which limits a lot of like the gameplay. But it really motivates students to be able to dribble a basketball or play soccer, or even do, drills, which I normally wouldn't spend a whole lot of time out, but it's something different to try to engage them. The big deal for her to convince my principal that we could use it is that we would use equipment and then not touch it for 2.5 days, because our schedule works out where we're not at school Wednesday. So if they used it Monday, they wouldn't touch it again until later that week. and of course they would be cleaned with special spray that kills COVID. But that is the most safe thing we can do. Now, once again, you or your principal may not let you feel comfortable with that, but we were working out for a good portion of class, and I love physical activity and I love working out, but I felt like I really couldn't ask kids to work out for 90 minutes straight, or even 30, 40 minutes straight every day. So equipment was a good thing. So we've done things like dribbling, a lot of paddle and racket skills. We've even, I think disc golf would end up being a good game that you could keep your own equipment and not share. Different challenges, like who can set the record for hitting a wiffle ball, as many times as you can. Kids really get into that. Just throw them a simple challenge. Maybe if you felt comfortable, or if your principal would allow, there are ways to at least limit hand touching with things like pickleball, because kids could use their paddle rather than their hand. But once again, I completely understand if you're like, I can't use equipment at all. I feel confident that with the class I have in my age group, that they can handle dribbling the basketball without sharing. Assessment. So for us right now, we do a portfolio sheet. Fitness log is for both students. They have to tell me, what did we learn in the lesson? Why did we learn it? What was your effort and attitude like? And how were you physically active outside of PE class? And they get a grade based on a rubric on that. At the same time, they also reflect on the goals that they set. One of the goals needs to be related to FitnessGram, because we're still doing FitnessGram as well in Georgia at the moment. I give them assessment on push-up, curl-up, and lunge throughout the semester, whether they're online or face-to-face. Online kids have to turn that in through Flipgrid. I give them a quiz. I give about one per quarter on basic health knowledge, why exercise is important. I personally do not grade them on participation. I normally, particularly in like a normal PE setting, don't grade on participation. Maybe you could make the argument that, students are struggling and they really need something to just help them show up to class. And I get that. I get that as an educator, but I feel like grades should be based on what students learn. But once again, that is my opinion. Something that we have to consider is, what is the point of grade? And what are we grading? I know statistically and from our administration nationally that there are more kids failing than ever. But why? You may required to put in a certain grade if students don't show up to class or something like that. And once again, now that's out of your control. But if it's in your control, then what are you grading? Are you grading kids on their Wi-Fi connectivity, tech skills, because they're not turning something in, obedience? Are we teaching and assessing students and grading students on what they're learning? Should we allow students to turn in late work? Another great discussion I've had with many colleagues. Students need to learn how to turn things on time. That is true. At the same time, I personally wasn't ready for online learning until I was in grad school. It's a personal decision, but I try to be as flexible as possible with students, as long as the grade reflects what they are learning. At some point, at the end of the semester, if a kid hasn't showed up all 9 weeks for whatever reason, the grade then becomes kind of pointless, in my opinion. But hey, does a grade really matter during a pandemic? I have asked myself this thousands of times, and the answer, I'll be honest, is probably not really. I think PE is the most important subject in the world. I really do. I think health is right there with it. But they're 60 or they're 100 in that class is not really going to, make them or break them as a person. So especially during this time. So when I think about this, empathy, equitable, flexibility, over and over and over again until honestly, it really does hurt. Something to think about. I had a colleague who wrote an email, and he was like, because we're having a debate at my school about should we, give students zeros or 50s, or, what should be done as their lowest grade. And he wrote out an email. He was like, I think teachers are upset. We're mad that kids aren't showing up. We're mad that we have to do all this extra stuff. We're mad. And just because we're upset with student doesn't mean that's what their grade should be. Doesn't mean students should fail, especially if they didn't turn something in and they're already understanding the concept later. I don't know about you, but there are a lot of things in PE that repeat themselves. Now, once again, I'm not necessarily an expert at this. This is just my opinion with what I think. And I do think that students should be graded on what they learn, not their Wi-Fi, not their obedience, not their tech skills, but what they have learned. So what do? I'm gonna let you know, kind of like a daily class type of thing. We do a dynamic warm-up. We do some type of fitness test, usually on Monday, Tuesday, which I see different classes on both days. We do some kind of fitness test. The push-up test takes like 40 seconds for them to do it. It's a good way for them to track it and keep goals on their portfolio sheet. We do some kind of skill work. So whether that's hitting a ball up and down in the paddle or against a wall, or dribbling a basketball by themselves, or doing some kind of soccer drill. We do have some kind of health moment, whether that be on, overall mental health, or, why the dangers of vaping. We're infusing that in physical education more than ever. We do some type of cool down, and then it's time for them to fill out their portfolio sheet. Of course, we try to make, if we're doing some type of fitness test, our fitness workout, we try to make it as entertainable, add challenges, but that is our what we do in short. So why we do it? I think this year has been a great year for me in particular to think as a PE teacher, what exercise am I teaching them and why? And how can I progress this in a healthy way for them to learn it and advance? So as you see, I almost start with everybody with a modified push-up. And I'm not going to read every one of these, but this is my thought process of starting from modified push-up to hand release push-up to challenge all levels. Me personally, I think this is probably my first year out of 6 of really thinking, how can I teach this exercise? Why should I teach this exercise? And what is most important? In the middle school curriculum, particularly that hip hinge, that squat movement is super important for them to play any kind of game. So that is one thing we focus on a lot. And that's how I modify it. So we start with a chair, we do a normal squat, jump squat, and then start with lunges. Another thing that I think is important, particularly in this day of age, because it doesn't require equipment, is starting to do dynamic movements. These are relatively simple, but the point is we want kids to be better movers. And I really did take the time to try to think, why do they need these? How can it help them move better? And that is the progression we use. So starting with dance, we start at a very simple dance with the Cupid Shuffle, and then end up with Footloose, which is a little more complicated. It's honestly something you can Google or email me if you're interested. I'd be glad to share that with you. And then we kind of ended with making up your own dance. We want kids to be creative, and that's kind of the, in our opinion, the hardest thing for them to do is to create a dance. And that's another thing we can do, whether it's face-to-face or virtual students, and we could do that safely with space. As far as what they are learning cognitively, another really good time to focus on why we're teaching and does that progression make sense. Of course, you got to start out with your rules and expectations, nothing new. And honestly, if I were being honest, we'd probably review that every class because things have been so topsy-turvy for children, what we want them to do and why we want them to do it and how they're supposed to do it. We start with fitnessgram, why that's important, why we do it. We talk about the health-related components of fitness. why exercise is important, and then training principles so they can understand frequency, intensity, time, and type, and how to create those workouts. And after that, of course, things like healthy eating, alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs, stress management. This year, really thought it was important to talk about internet safety and how to find online information correctly, which is definitely a health standard in my state and probably your state as well. But it was really important. We talk about weather safety in Georgia. It's super hot and why to stay hydrated. And then we go into sports related components of fitness. To me, this is a logical order of things that they've got to know to be healthy and well. But the whole point of me telling you this is that this is a great time to look at why you teach and how you teach it and not just throw something out there. To me, this is a logical order which children can intake the information and really apply it to different things. And they really need these topics now more than ever, in my humble, biased opinion. Another thing I want you to think about is, even if you're completely virtual, how can you impact the school? How can you make it more fun? And I am an optimist by nature. I don't think things will necessarily go back to normal. But I do think things will get better, and eventually we will be back to a more normal way of what we did before the pandemic. So what can I do for my school, my community? For me, grants have still been a great opportunity. I still think there are organizations out there giving money for health and wellness, and your students and my students deserve the best. So that has been a powerful tool. And then there's Wellness Week, which our students are going to have at the end of March here. And you can read about that on the flyer. You can also come to my other presentation, which is a shameless plug there. But once again, we're trying to do things to impact their health and wellness and make them understand things they can do to help them cope with this difficult situation. So to recap, what is most important? That is something you have to decide personally, what is most important. And I think most of us would agree things like relationships and maybe, what are your most important standards, and try to hit those and help them understand. Try to focus on things you can control. You can't control student situations. It is super frustrating when kids don't show up or don't respond in the chat, or they're still in class after you've said goodbye to everybody. And I think last but not least, how can you make it fun? What can you do to help these children in this so difficult time to have a little fun in school, particularly with them being online because they don't have that social interaction. So what things can we do to help them brighten their day? Because let's face it, they're going to remember, 10 years from now, very little of what we taught them. Hopefully the highlights, those big things of why exercise is important if they need to move their body. But they're definitely going to remember their teachers who made them feel good and made them feel special during this very difficult time. So adjusting our curriculum to understand that this is different than any other time is important. The last thing I want you to do is I did talk about Flipgrid, and I want to learn from you. So if you have a cool tool that you use, I'd like you to go ahead and scan that QR code. It will take you to where you can post a video of yourself talking about it, which I'd really love to meet you. And a good way, if you don't know about Flipgrid, you can learn about it. You can also type in that link, and feel free to comment on other people's posts as well. It's like, oh, I really like that tool, or hey, that's awesome. Can you tell me more about it? Flipgrid is awesome. There's so many possibilities, fantastic, and really easy to use. So go ahead and scan that for me, and I'll see you virtually. If you need anything from me, pretty responsive on Twitter, and you can always email my Gmail at mullispe@gmail.com. I cannot thank you enough. I hope that you have gotten something or at least one idea that you can use to, help your students out, or one concept you want to think about and rethink, or use this tough season in education to help you focus on something that maybe you haven't had time to focus on before. You are a superhero. You are wonderful. And as I end all of my classes, thank you for being here. Love you, mean it. Bye. Thank you so much.